I have a confession to make. I sort of clickbaited you. Now, I am going to talk about why Anima failed, but not for the reasons that you've been mostly hearing about in discussions and social media and so on. There are definitely problems that people have with Anima, yeah, which mostly sum up to a handful of complaints, like there's not enough of it, there's too much stuff to buy with it, and the stuff itself is very expensive. Objectively, that's good feedback, but is that it? Is there not a worse problem that some may not realize? In today's video, by the way, hey, it's Soul with another video that's more something to listen than to watch. Today I'm going to talk about how Anima is a demonstration of Blizzard's near total failure to deliver fun and farmable and fulfilling content specifically to players outside of what I call the big three of World of Warcraft endgame, that is, organized raiding, Mythic Keystone dungeons, and rated PvP. I'll break down Blizzard's well-meaning approach with Anima and what works. I'll also give some arguments and opinions on where things went wrong, and then I'll offer up a targeted idea on how to improve upon world content experiences in the future, whether it's a future patch 9.1 or a brand new expansion. In case you haven't guessed, this is a part of a series of videos that focuses mostly on delivering or improving on content outside of the competitive level. Now, you can call this content like solo content or casual content or worthless garbage because, well, Blizzard should be working on things that are relevant like class balance and high-end content that I guess all players should be working towards. And I respect that viewpoint. But for the next however many minutes, I'd like a moment of your respect while I share my own. Shadowlands brought us the Covenant Sanctum, an endgame feature that's governed by time and currency. By time, I mean Renown, which is a growth system that lasted for approximately 16 weeks before capping, so that piece of the pie is over now. But what it did was to ease players into this giant pile of different rewards and unlocks, including cosmetics, and a little bit of player power. Anima is the currency, and Anima floats in all walks of Shadowlands content, from Castle Nathria to your favorite battleground to your least favorite world quest. By design, it can be continually farmed, but that's kind of a facade, right? There's a soft cap of how much Anima is ever available over the course of a week. Like, there's only so many world quests and treasure chests and rares to be found after all. And Anima stands as the gateway to virtually all of the Covenant Sanctum's features, as well as its rewards. I admit that I'm being hyperbolic when I claim that Anima has outright failed. In fact, Anima and the Covenant Sanctum is what a lot of people have broadly asked for. Side content that's not required but gives cool stuff. Something to fall back on when the progression is done for the day or the patch or even the expansion. For example, we flocked to the Netherwing dailies, we flew in circles around this floating island, we dove into a mine day after day after day looking for eggs and, doing the same few rotations of dailies again and again. During Wrath of the Lich King, we had the Argent Tournament. In Mist Pandaria, we had the Cloud Serpent dailies. Warlords had the various garrison activities, Legion had the many artifact appearances, while Battle for Azeroth brought island adventures and warfronts. As early as the Shadowlands Alpha, I sang my praises for Anima that it is the casual's endgame, an entirely optional experience to be enjoyed now or well after Shadowlands is over. And I stand by the fundamentals of that statement. At least as far as we know, this content isn't gonna go anywhere, there's no fear of missing out, and players who participate almost exclusively in world content have this constant little thing to work for. As a heroic raider myself, I squeeze in the time to farm for Anima so I can complete those weekly quests and to build up my sanctum because I want the perks. I want some of the transmog, and I find the activities to be fun distractions outside of failing more high-level keys. That's why I have very little sympathy, and obviously this is just my opinion, but very little sympathy for those who want an Anima catch-up, who want these rewards faster, because this is what we asked for. A long-term grind that doesn't punish you for taking your sweet-ass time. I read these complaints and they come off as if these cosmetics are designed to be fully collected by the end of the expansion or else. But since when was that given a mandate? Given the nature of how to unlock all this stuff, I don't see these becoming expansion exclusive, and even if that statement isn't 100% certain, speaking just for me, I'm not the type to change my player behavior out of fear. But this isn't the primary reason why I think Anima isn't working out. It's actually far worse than that. In short, a lot of the visible discourse goes back to the lack of Anima rewards, and the current stats of my sanctum doesn't make a case to suggest that Anima is fine, just that managing Anima with one character is a pretty reasonable endeavor. A few weeks back, Blizzard upped the amount of Anima that dropped, which is great, but again, it's a facade, because to whom did this increase target? It wasn't to everyone. In fact, it was to raiders and the dungeon people. There was no buff to the amount that people get from world content. Blizzard instead catered to the big three, because those players wanted to be able to farm more efficiently, so they can knock out their weekly quest with a raid clear. Because to those players, world quests and outdoor content no longer had value. They were too long, they were too out of the way, they were inconvenient. Meanwhile, Blizzard did almost nothing for the players who exclusively run outdoor content, so I guess this wasn't a problem for them? I disagree. I mean, the best that we can hope for is that this particular audience runs Raid Finder difficulty, which does enjoy that increased Anima. But I gotta pause for a second. I have to admit that it's pretty hard for me, and probably others, to wrangle with the notion that there are players out there who are normally perfectly happy with just plugging away at outdoor dailies and farming rares and maybe doing old content that can be trivialized, and once every blue moon they'll hop into group content. But they're out there. And I think there's a lot of them, but there doesn't seem to be a voice of unified discourse. Now, of course, let me stop myself right there too. I don't claim to be that voice, but as a commentator, I think I'm beginning to understand this perspective more and more. So in case we're not totally on the same page, let's play around a little bit. I'll assume the profile of this non-competitive player. So let's redefine myself. I am now a player who does like to log on almost every day for something to do in the world of Warcraft. I don't participate in organized content with raids, dungeons, or PvP, so at best I do Raid Finder, the daily heroic dungeon, regular battlegrounds, the kind of content that some feel that they should be removed because it literally has no value, or at least they think it doesn't, but to me, this is the world of Warcraft. Now with that in mind, there's still plenty to do every day thanks to Anima and the Covenant Sanctum and world quests, as well as, of course, the previous 15 years of WoW. There are still weekly events to participate in, except for the Mythic Dungeon event. Nah, that's I think that's a little bit beyond my level. But let's break this down at a more analytical level. Let's pretend that I just re-upped my subscription to Shadowlands like now, after patch 9.0.5. So I choose a class, I reach level 60, I choose a covenant that, for the sake of argument, let's just say that I'm perfectly happy with it, and I never plan on changing. So here we are. And what now? In Shadowlands 9.05, Renown is fully unlocked, so I can immediately dive into farming for Anima and Renown, and of course gear. Gear is important too, because the world can get pretty dangerous. Between the world boss and Covenant callings and the daily heroic, the Covenant campaign, and the weekly quests for Renown, I'm going to estimate that it would take something like 2 to 3 weeks to complete the Covenant campaign, which is the same as like getting Renown 24. By then, I would have sufficient item level to take on Raid Finder difficulty. And by the way, all 4 wings have an item level requirement of 170. A full clear will mean more Renown, more gear, and stuff from the Great Vault each week. So by the end of that 3rd week, I would be pretty close to Renown 30, which is where World Quest rewards cap out. Around this stage of progression, I'll have done a pretty pitiful amount of Anima farming, and I'm well on my way to capping out my maximum item level based on the content that I do. That item level is around the 200 or so range, thanks to the Covenant set that can be upgraded to 197, as well as of course world quest rewards and maybe the weekly time walket event that could score me one piece of Castle Nathria gear every few weeks. So give or take some RNG, I'll reach this item level in about a month. And I'm gonna guesstimate some more that this is with about 15 or so hours a week of playing time dedicated to progression. And here is where we run into this very discouraging problem. My strength has just about peaked after only about a month of playing fairly passionately. Now, there are still plenty of things to do. There's transmog to earn, there's sanctum stuff to upgrade, there's activities to be completed, and pets and mounts and other such things to be found. That's great, but there's nothing outside of the big three that will help me become more powerful. And some would say that's okay. After all, I'm just doing world quests. How strong do I need to be? And that's a really good point. At an item level of 200 or so, most content is pretty soloable, except for those damn elite world quests and of course the world boss. Torghast outside of the twisting corridors is doable, and I'm quite capable of surviving them all. The full Covenant set bonus doesn't exactly break the game, but it's not trivial either. But is this enough strength? Is this enough throughput that I can grant to my character? I'd like to think no. But if I want to dare make a claim that I should be able to grow even stronger, I better have a darn good reason to. And here's the reason. It's because I want to grow stronger. Bullshit, right? I mean, come on, like, you can't push that sort of design philosophy out of sheer will. Or can we? If you're still with me, I'd like you to hear me out. I'm going to argue that players outside of the big three cap out on their strength way too fast, thanks to how quickly they can earn renown and complete the Covenant campaign and get access to Raidfinder. Those three milestones happen pretty close together, resulting in this period where these sorts of players are showered with cool stuff before it dries out very, very quickly. Now recall past expansions, starting with Mists of Pandaria, and definitely into Legion and Battle for Azeroth. WoW began this trend that affected the psyche of a WoW player with moments of surprise, warforging, titan forging, corruption, even artifact power, because at every turn was a chance to grow a little bit stronger. And it didn't matter if it was the 3rd week of the expansion or the 30th. Now, it was chaotic and it was frustrating, but during the past, 9 or so years, there was a chance to always get a little bit stronger. Shadowlands went cold turkey and threw down this hard cap for players outside of the big three, with cosmetics as their way of, I guess, making up for it. Anima's failure comes from the realization that its ability to strengthen players is capped to an item level of 200, but some would argue that that's okay. So what we have is this casual player base, for lack of a better word, who very early on no longer feels that satisfaction of growing stronger, while organized PvP and dungeons and raids have a path to greater strength. After reaching that cap, there is no RNG, there are no moments of surprise, just Anima, and the math needed to calculate when everything can be maxed out or earned. I argue that this is a big problem, even if it's not a problem for those of us who have a wider palette and are willing to run organized content. There's been plenty of discussion over which of the big three activities deserves the highest item level, or at least an even item level, or who should gear the fastest, and that's a different sort of conversation to have. The conversation right now is that the rest of the players out there are essentially power-starved and are all but forgotten. There's a reason that they don't participate in the big three, and the reasons why don't matter. So what can we do to make life outside of the big three a bit more exciting for these kinds of players? Can we map out a path for them that won't catch too much negative attention? Because ideally, we would want a path of meaningful and measurable progress that a raider or a PvPer or a dungeon person won't look at and feel as if it's required to add more to their plate so they can complete their sort of content. We're only looking to give all players a fair shot, not to change the gearing meta. Ian Hezekiah has said that help is on the way, maybe in 9.1, but he didn't have anything to add. Fortunately, I have a master plan. and you probably won't like anything or everything about it. And this is just one part of improving the game outside of the big three, but I believe that this is a step in the right direction. So listen up. The Covenant Sanctum has stuff to build and upgrade. It's all laid out there for convenient presentation and expansion. So let's add another thing to build and upgrade that I will call the Sanctum Forge. Unlike the other Sanctum features, the Forge cannot be built until Renown level 34, which happens to be after your soul binds are fully unleashed, after the Covenant campaign is over, and well after that World Quest reward item level cap has been reached. The Forge is going to have 3 ranks, but whatever, it can have more. And I'll list 3 perks, but these are just examples. These are just rough ideas to illustrate what it is I'm trying to do here. At rank 1 of the Sanctum Forge, the maximum World Quest reward goes up to an item level of 207. Right now it's in like the upper 190s or so. On top of that, you get a modest 10% bonus to Anima rewards from World Quests. This is something that probably everyone will want to invest into for long-term gains. At level 2, the Covenant set will unlock a whopping 4 more upgrade levels, so from 7 ranks to 11. That's going to give it a new maximum item level of 210 for your Covenant set, which is like darn near heroic raids. In fairness, I would consider raising the Anima costs of these last 4 ranks by quite a bit. After all, this is what's going to be the long-term, long-tail item level progression that ought to last until close to the end of a given season. And when the Forge reaches level 3, you get even crazier perks. So, while you're in the outdoor world, as in just Shadowlands zones, or if you're in regular to heroic dungeons, or in Raid Finder difficulty, you get a 15% flat increase to your primary stats. That's like the equivalent of 10 or so item level. Obviously, this is a very, very strong throughput increase, so I'll reiterate, this perk does not apply anywhere else, such as normal and higher raids, or Mythic Plus, or Battlegrounds, or even War Mode. On top of that, you get a weekly quest that scores you like 500 to 1,000 Anima or so. It sounds okay until you realize the costs that are involved to upgrade the Forge and power up the Covenant sets and everything are pretty much going to necessitate doing this weekly. Essentially, the Sanctum Forge is a contained content loop, tailored specifically for those who aren't in the big three. Because apart from that Anima bonus from the rank 1, these perks aren't very attractive at all for people who do organized content, obviously thanks to the low item level cap and the other restrictions. Obviously the perks and numbers can be adjusted, but the aim here is to make a feature that for the most part remains optional, that for some wouldn't give this Sanctum upgrade a second glance. For those who are interested in the Forge though, this turns the Sanctum into a feature that extends power progression well into a given season. The Covenant set turns into the best in slot set and what your Anima investments will eventually pour into. It shares some similarities to the crafting system from Warlords of Draenor, as in, you get this gear that you upgrade over a long period, with strength that's equal to that of heroic raid gear. This doesn't deliver on moments of surprise like Warforging, but it works more like artifact power. It lays down a path that will lead to higher throughputs in the content that's relevant to this profile of player. And when it's fully upgraded, the gear is viable enough to do mid-level endgame content when that blue moon rises. In the hands of a skilled player, this is going to make a character feel like a monster where the Forge buffs apply, making it an appropriate and temporary reward for hard work during the season. Meanwhile, these clear restrictions don't make the Forge feel required to progress into organized endgame content, aka the big three. The itemization of secondary stats might be fixed on this set, but I'm gonna kind of write that off and just question how much of a priority that's going to be to this target audience. Some might say that this doesn't feel fair, that the path to being powerful outdoors might be faster by going this Forge route rather than the route of the big three, but here's the thing. There's a really good chance that you will never see these kinds of players and they will not see you. They're out in the world while you're in a raid. They're in daily heroic dungeons while you're in a mythic. They may not be online as much as you are, but the whole point is that these types of players are largely separated from each other, regardless of whatever newfangled system is in place. This is what I think is key to separating power progression between outdoor content and the big three: perks with restrictions. And at least in my armchair dev headcanon, this doesn't seem so overwhelming to implement, nor is it super difficult for players to understand. It's actually not so different from the outcry for a return of PvP power, or the current discussions of set bonuses that only apply to raids that might come in patch 9.1. I'm using Anima and the Covenant Sanctum as this example for improving on world content because obviously we're in the present. I'm using what's given to provide some familiarity. In some far-off expansion without a Sanctum or a Forge, we can apply the same principles directly to world quests and introduce special currencies that apply to world and queued content. Quick example, like gear from world quests can have set bonuses that provide perks like those I mentioned earlier, and they can be individually upgraded from stuff picked up from world content, rares and treasures, queued dungeons, and raid finder. I'd like to think that this is easy enough to understand. And the takeaway from all of this is that the feeling of progression is for more than just the players at the top. Even those who don't participate in bleeding edge content appreciate having something to work for that results in even small gains in throughput. It's kind of like working out, right? It's great to feel healthier and stronger, but it's also nice now that you can fit into that shirt or dress. You know, I couldn't think of a great analogy where you get cosmetic stuff, so oh well. I tried to stay on subject, but this is not the only improvement that I want to see for outdoor content. The only thing that I'm trying to address is that feeling of working for a bit of player power. I talked about collections in another video, and you bet that I have plenty more feedback and ideas on how changes, even small ones like these, can make a huge impact on how players feel acknowledged by the game that they play. I was really excited to share these thoughts, and I'd love to hear your nitpicking or your challenging questions, or even better, some new ideas that you might have thought of that come to mind. Share them in a comment. Like this video and share it with others. Subscribe to the channel and consider becoming a patron to support more video essays like these and all things Warcraft. Thank you for watching and listening, and I hope to see you soon. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.